Hello, hello, hello. Today is Thursday, July 2nd. Okay, we're in the summer. It is hot where I am. I hope it's as hot as you like it where you are. Welcome to Let's Talk Power Live, where we delve into conversations about power and education. I was having a discussion with a group of colleagues, and we were talking about the power dynamics in their building and in some of the relationships they experience. And it just hit me. That's why we talk about power and education here at Let's Talk Power Live in real and actionable ways. I'm Dr. Tangi Reed Marshall. I am your host for our time together. And it gives me pleasure to bring this conversation to the fore. Why do I talk about power? It is real and education as much as it is real in other industries. And we don't talk about it here in education because sometimes we like to have big conversations, and the power conversation feels big and it feels like it's above us and we can't get our hands around it. I come out of an environment where it's important to be as open and as transparent as possible. And I want to make your understanding of the dynamics of power in your area as real and touchable and tangible as I possibly can. And I bring to you nearly 3 decades of educational experience across multiple levels. And I myself and am a reformed power protector, which is why I'm so adamant about having a real conversation about it. And this week, we're going to have a conversation about something we don't talk a lot about. Educators are entering summer. You may have already started, but there's a thing that we talk about in education a lot, and we that's called the summer slide. The summer slide is really spoken about regarding children, what they forget, what might have to be retaught. And it's often spoken about from a place of frustration that, oh my gosh, these kids didn't learn anything. Oh my gosh, these kids forget so much. But today, we're going to talk about the power behind the adult summer slide. Summer slides happen at the kid level and it happens at the adult level too. But it happens at the adult level in different ways. And before we get started with that, definitely want to always, we always talk about our power definitions. And every week I give you a definition about power because it matters. So here is that definition. The education is the instrument of democratic designs, and it is no less the instrument of power. The control of information, the shaping of understanding, and the influence of judgment are critical elements of democratic design, power theory, and educational philosophy. That's the capital P. It is everywhere. It is pervasive. I was thinking about this. How do I explain it in a way that makes complete, actionable, objective sense? I want you, if you're a leader, you're a middle school leader in particular, but if you're a leader in any aspect of the education realm, and there is something going on in a relationship, this push, this pull, these resistances that you cannot put your name or your finger on, that is the power happening. If you are in a position of authority and you are trying to move the needle and make some significant change, but you are up against resistance, you're up against people protecting systems that benefit them more than they benefit children. And that is the power dynamic we talk about, that protection of our systems, our processes, our policies that leave us in charge as opposed to really centering the development of children. So, what does that capital P power look like when we break it down and name it as instructional power? Well, here's that definition. Understanding your instructional power. Instructional power can be understood as an educator's use of their state, district, and building ascribed job-related authority to afford or constrain a student's access to learning. That means whatever level you're in education, if it opens the door for a student to have access to an education or it shuts the door, even inadvertently, that is the exercise of instructional and educational power. And we all have it. So it's not a matter of whether we have it or whether we don't have it. We all have it. The question is, how do we use it and to what end and who benefits? But before I go any further, let's do a couple of housekeeping pieces here. Number one, to all of our subscribers, we thank you for being on this power journey with us. But here's what we've been learning about our data. Our data has shown us that over 85% of our viewers are still dating us. We like dating, but we want to be in a relationship. So please hit the like, subscribe button and share. Bring others with you on this power journey. And I want to also share with you our Messy Middle article series. Please go ahead. This is the third article in our Messy Middle article series. Article 1 was on adults as data. Article 2 was on the discipline, the messiness of middle school discipline. And Article 3 is on the soft ceiling of misplaced compassion. Get that link. Go ahead and scan that QR code. Leave it up for a second so you can take a look at it. And if you're so inclined, you can find it on LinkedIn. Follow us on LinkedIn, put in the Messy Middle, and you will be able to go ahead and get the article series. Next thing I want to share with you is this. We have our summer power chats coming your way. We are bringing ed authors to the table, talking about their books, one big idea. And the reason why is because as much as our students' summer slide, the adult summer slide. So our power chats are all about stemming the tide of the adult summer slide. And that's really important. So let's go ahead and talk about what this summer slide for adults is all about. One thing I want to say is this. When I began really researching this, and we did a little bit of this last year when we began talking about adult summer slide, the thing is this, there really isn't named adult summer slide. There isn't technical line by line, linearly connected research data on what would be called an adult summer slide. But here's what I found. I want to show you what I found. Here's what we know about summer drifting and sliding. Here's what it happens. It comes across as cognitive disengagement. That professional knowledge, that confidence, and that planning, those habits can dull when reflection is not intentionally maintained. So we know July. July is that time when your mind is done. You have given everything you could from September or August straight till June. You may have even had some PD right at the end of school, right? We know that happens. I was back part of a partnership that supported that kind of end of school year planning for the coming year. But as July moves forward, what tends to happen is if your mind disengages from the reflective practices, when you get back in August, you'll find it much more difficult to engage in the planning process. I remember my first time going back to school, actually as a new teacher, and then as I stayed in the classroom longer. When we first get back in August, I would hear my colleagues say, we just got back. Our minds aren't there yet. That happens. But what does that look like at varying levels? So at the leader level, that can mean that you're focusing more on the logistics as opposed to really thinking about strategic planning. You do the strategic planning right when school ends, but you get into the logistics of it all, schedules, who's going where, what rooms do you have to move around, what teachers might have left, what teachers are coming back in. You really change your mind into the logistics of things as opposed to the vision for the building. And what happens if you are an AP? You might be focusing more on the compliance thing to support your leader, as opposed to having some deeper conversations around the culture. We understand that, right? That's happening because no one's in the building. So maybe a conversation about culture doesn't seem like the right thing to have at the moment, but you need to think about that as you lean into July so that your muscles don't quote unquote atrophy. So what else begins to happen? The other thing is planning avoidance, right? Burnout and the absence of structured reflection time can delay meaningful instructional and leadership planning. Listen, I understand that planning is hard. I would spend hours planning, going through my plans, revamping them, looking at my data. And by the end of the year, I was spent. And then when I moved into coaching, it was even more of a challenge because we were bringing to bear multiple structures and multiple perspectives on the planning process. So when July hits, you literally yank the plug out of the wall and you step away from the process. But the challenge to that is if you step too far back, it's going to cause an inability to ramp up when you need to ramp up. And your mind is going to be like, you know what? I don't even know what to do about this planning thing. And I want to say this also, and I'm going to say a controversial statement here. Most school districts, or a lot of school districts across the country, are leaning into high quality instructional materials. There's nothing wrong with having high quality instructional materials. But what I'm finding is, as I talk to educators and I talk to coaches, but more importantly, when I talk to leaders, they're finding that because their high quality instructional materials come pre-made or ready-made, they're finding that their educators are beginning to lack the skill of effective planning. So there is this unintended consequence of a high quality instructional material where it is leading to some instructional planning de-skilling. I had a conversation with a superintendent actually, and they're going through what's called an internalization process. And what they're finding is they have bought into the HQIM, and they're now finding themselves having to go back and teach their educators how to think deeply and critically about their instructional materials because everything is there. But everything isn't there for every single kid in front of every teacher. There is no one single curriculum that's going to be able to meet every need of every student. It's going to take a skilled educator to look at data, understand and know their students, and take a high quality set of instructional and learning materials and internalize all of that. So if you get to a place where your planning begins to atrophy, you want to make sure that you're ramping up. And it's a good thing you're here tonight. So what else happens? The other thing happens is sometimes when reflection is thin, we return to familiar routines. Adults are more likely to restart what they already know instead of redesigning what students need. Ouch. We hit a default button. We lean into what is familiar as opposed to deep reflection and taking the time to look critically at our data. Now, do you need time to rest? Absolutely. You got to step away. Your brain actually needs the time. But the challenge here is not the stepping away. The challenge here is stepping too far away and not coming back soon enough so that when it's time to begin preparing for the coming school year, you've stepped so far back that to get back into the game of it all, you just hit the default button and keep the ground running. And then lastly, disconnect from current student realities. When adults step away from changing student needs, school context, and instructional realities, August decisions can be based on old assumptions. We believe that when we step too far back, we lean back into, like I said, what's familiar. And we assume that we don't need to make the adjustments that might be necessary. That's important to consider. What does it look like from every angle to really lean into some power moves? And to what does it mean that when I, as an adult, slide too far back from really critically understanding the needs of my students? Now, here's the thing you got to remember. You've already sent a group of students on to your colleagues. That is, unless you are looping from one grade to the next and you're going to keep your students. So if you are leaning into old assumptions about the students that you had, you're going to miss something. You're going to create an environment where students may not necessarily get the best environment that they need. We don't talk about this part of the summer slide because we really lean into student cognition and students summer sliding from a content perspective. This summer slide that I'm bringing up tonight that no one talks about is the slide that is a professional learning slide. Is it going to happen? 100%. You're going to slide. You're going to experience this break in what it means to be connected to the work. And you're going to do it based upon your position, whether you are the building leader, whether you are the classroom leader, whether you are the district leader. And I want to bring this conversation about summer slide, particularly to my middle school leaders here. Because of the brain shift that's happening with your students, their summer slide is even more impactful. And because we tend towards them, and I say them, I mean our students, we have been conflating sociology and biology. When our middle schoolers are really going through that rapid, intense brain shift, they're going to forget. They're going to forget because that's what the brain is doing. It is shedding. And so maybe as an adult, what we need to recognize is that our middle schoolers are going to forget. And instead of making it problematic, we need to lean into possibilities, recognizing that their brains are developing faster than any other time except for when that child was a toddler. So what does it mean for what we have to do on the adult side? On the adult side, we need to do a couple of things. And these are the power moves I want to walk us through, that I walk us through every week. But before I get there, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. The first thing I want us to do is I want us to really lean into expecting the adult slide. That's most important. Expect the adult slide. What does that look like? Expect it in July. You're off in July. You're going to the beach. You may or may not take a book with you. I don't know. You might just pull that hat over your head and go to sleep. I want you to identify what may pause for too long, though. Remember, if you step back too far, coming back in is going to be harder. And then I want you to protect one reflection routine. Think about a reflection routine that you might have used all across the school year. What might be one of those you might protect? And I want to break this down by role. If you are a principal, it might look like I said earlier, what part of the vision could get buried underneath all of the logistics. You got a lot of moving parts going on. So what part of your vision might start getting buried underneath schedules, underneath classroom moves, underneath new painting jobs, and making sure the floors get waxed? You have a lot on your plate as a leader. So hold your vision higher. If you are an AP, where might you begin to default towards compliance as opposed to really leaning into thinking critically as a culture builder, for a culture partner for the building? And for my coaches out there, where might you prepare things instead of preparing for teacher thinking? A lot of times as coaches, we take on the role of preparing everything for the teachers, thereby, number one, de-skilling them as opposed to building their capacity. So as a coach, where might you be taking on responsibility that isn't all yours and releasing your teachers for whom you are responsible for real capacity building? And for my teachers, I want you to think about those familiar routines that you just want to dust off and keep it moving with. That is something I want to challenge us on as we lean into power move number 1, expecting the adult slide. And what is that going to lead to? The impact of this is leaders reduce August reactivity because they anticipate drift before it becomes default. Anticipate it. When we would go on trips with our son, with our whole family, our son would wait and wait and wait before we were down the road, before he would say, I got to go to the bathroom. I got to go to the bathroom. And then we'd have to drive further until we came across a rest stop. We got into the habit of saying, Robert, anticipate that you have to go to the bathroom and go now. That saved us a lot. So power move number 2, I want us to reconnect before we restart. Sometimes we just jump in from where we left off, as opposed to let's give ourselves some space to reconnect. Reflect before you repeat the familiar. Ask yourself some questions. Did that thing I'm holding on to, do I know what I'm holding on to it for? Do I know why I'm holding on to it? Do I know the results I got from it? And did I get the results I wanted? I want you to name what still matters and what is needed. You might need something different. You might need to change something. And you might need to hold on to that familiar thing that worked well. But you've got to reflect on it first. And then I want you to pick a familiar routine. Maybe it's the same one from power move number 1. And I want you to revise it so you can stretch yourself. Allow this time to be a time for stretching. And for principals, what does that look like? Reconnect to the vision before opening the staff meetings. Take some time to really dig into your vision before you bring your staff back in. For my assistant principals out there, reconnect to the culture behind the discipline expectations. You tend to, as an AP, handle a lot of the discipline in the building. Want you to think about the culture of the disciplines. Are you creating a culture where students are becoming disciplined, or is it a disciplined culture? Those aren't the same things. Students who are becoming disciplined is very different than a disciplined culture. And maybe I'll do a Let's Talk Power Live on the power of disciplined or a disciplined culture. If that sounds interesting to you, somebody give me a 1 in our comment section. Let me know if you think having a power chat or Let's Talk Power Live on building a culture of discipline versus a disciplined culture. Let's talk about that. For my coaches, I want you to connect to teacher growth. I want you to really be reflecting on building your educator capacity. What is that purpose before you just repeat last year's first routines of the year? And then for my teachers, I want you to really lean into what can be fresh and new for this year. What's the impact of that? Leaders interrupt automatic back to school patterns before they become the conditions students inherit. Some of the things that students inherit are important to keep. Others we have to let go, but we must be willing to reconnect before we restart the year. Power move number 3. Here's the big one. Power move number 3. Prepare the conditions for agency building. Before I even get into this one, I'm going to invite you to go to our website, www.liaisoneducationalpartners.org. Go into our tools section and get our Building Authentic Student Agency tool. This is going to put you on track to really understanding the degree to which agency development is apparent in your building. So, what does this mean? Identify one condition students need. Name the adult practice it requires. Develop the process to introduce and share with your team. What does that look like for my leaders? What do we mean by student agency? As a leader, particularly my middle school leaders, have you had explicit conversations with your staff about student agency? What it is not, and how it's going to move in your building. Have you had that? I challenge and charge you to begin that. For my assistant principals, ask this question to yourselves. Do our culture systems build responsibility or only reinforce compliance? That connects to, are we building a disciplined culture or a culture of discipline? It's not the same thing. For my coaches, I want you to ask this. What do teachers need in order to practice student agency? And how can I, one, learn more about it myself and build their capacity to do it? And then teachers, ask this question. What kind of agency do I want students to practice from day one? And you might surprise yourself, because sometimes what we as adults consider agency building is no more than us having them choose from our adult decided decisions. It's more than that. But what does this look like when we prepare the conditions for student agency building? Leaders enter August ready to move agency from an individual idea to a shared adult practice. That's huge. If everybody in your building is not on the same page about what agency is, I guarantee you it's going to happen in pockets. And it's going to happen in ways that are disparate and that are disconnected and create disorder. So go ahead and lean into agency building as a shared understanding and a shared practice. Everybody in the building needs to be on the same page. So those are the power moves this week to really embrace the fact that you're going to really do this adult summer slide. It is inevitable. So embrace it. But I don't want you to step back too far. I want you to lean into it, but really get those reflective practices. Expect it, reconnect, and then really prepare your conditions. That is our chat for today. Thank you for joining me for another session of Let's Talk Power Live. Here are some reminders for you. Go ahead and get that messy middle. Get the article, get all three, read them, share them. Let's have a conversation about it. Also, want to remind you to be on the lookout for our power chats are coming your way. About 10 or 15 minutes, quick conversation, one book, one big idea, ed authors. And next week, I'm excited to bring to Let's Talk Power Live none other than Kwame Simmons, founder of the Simmons Advantage. That is all for now. However you celebrate the 4th, please have a wonderful 4th of July, and I will see you next week for another episode of Let's Talk Power Live.